Hi, it's Emma, and today I'm going to be doing science experiments with the Light as Dream rules and just experimenting with different ways I can make them and how that affects the final result. So first I'm going to be cooking 6 of them in this loaf pan and seeing how they turn out, and then I'm going to bake 4 in a muffin pan to see how the rolls cook in a bread pan versus a muffin pan. And then I'm going to use the same muffin pan and put 5 without a butter glaze, and then I'm going to bake 5 with the free-form technique, so I'll be pinching them at the bottom. That I'll bake in a pan. I think that since there isn't individual compartments, I think that each roll will expand more outwards than upwards because it's not being constrained by the walls of a muffin container. And then for the ones in the muffin container, I think they will rise higher in height, but we'll see. And then with the ones without the butter glaze, I think they will be not quite as sweet or not sweet, but I think they'll be not as soft. We'll see. And for the ones with a free form technique, I think they will be fluffier because the gluten has the walls for structure. The first step for me is to wash my hands, and then I can show you all the ingredients and what brands I've used. All right, so we have all my ingredients. Here we have the 1 3½ cups of whole milk. I'm using Friendly Farms whole milk. And then here is 4 tablespoons of shortening. It's just Crisco. And then for the bread flour, we're using Pillsbury Best bread flour. And for the yeast, we're using Red Star Active dry yeast. And this is the sugar. I don't have the bag, but I can insert a picture into the video. And here are the eggs, and the brand is Golden Eggs. The butter is unsalted from Hy-Vee. And here's the salt. Salt is iodized table salt. And then here's the baking powder. It's Baker's Corner baking powder. And for the baking soda, it is Trader Joe's baking soda. And for the cooking oil, it's Carlini canola oil spray. All right, now I'm ready to scald my milk, and then so I'm gonna wait for it to get to 180 degrees, and then I'll put in the shortening and stir it in, and then wait for it to cool down for 5 minutes. So I'll get started on that. And right now the milk is quite cold. It is 53.6 degrees Fahrenheit because it was in the fridge. So we'll wait for that to get to 180. Excuse me, I also forgot that we'll be adding in the sugar once it reaches 180 degrees. It is now over 180 degrees, so I'm gonna remove it from the heat, turn off the heat, and then I'm gonna add in my 1/2 cup of sugar and my shortening, or my 4 tablespoons of shortening. And I'm gonna stir it and then set a timer for 5 minutes. and that the scalding the milk process for me took about 10 minutes. And in the meantime, I can add 2 cups of flour, or the bread flour, and the yeast to the to my stand mixer with the paddle attachment. When I first put the sugar and the shortening into the hot milk, the shortening kind of took a while to dissolve, but now it's fully dissolved and I can see all the oil bubbles in the milk. And I can tell that the sugar is dissolved because I don't feel it scraping at the bottom. It's still 153 degrees, but it's been 5 minutes. So I'm gonna put it into the bread flour and yeast mixture, and then mix that on low, medium, medium, low for 4 minutes. So when we scalded the milk, we were essentially killing off a protein in the whey protein that can be harmful in the development and the rise of the gluten. Could potentially make the bread not rise as high. So that was the precautionary measure that we took. And this is what the mixture texture looks like now when at the beginning of the 4 minutes. So this is what the bread is looking like now. It is much more incorporated and it smells very yeasty. And now I'm just gonna let the dough sit for 30 minutes. And even in that just 30 minutes, the bread has really risen a lot. Now I'm gonna add half a cup of bread flour from the 2 cups. And then I'm gonna stir for a little bit after each addition. Even just now, when I first started mixing, the bread really dropped. But now I'm gonna add another cup of flour and mix it for 1 minute. This is the texture after the second half cup of flour. This is the bread after the third half cup addition of the bread flour. It looks very dough-like. It's all together. This is what it looks like now. It's actually very hard to incorporate that last half cup of bread flour. I had to take the dough off the paddle and it made a big mess with the flour, but it is incorporated now. And now I'm gonna wait an hour for it to rise, but I will check in 30 minutes to see if it needs to be punched down. The dough definitely looks really big, so I'm gonna take it off the paddle and then punch it down. Taking it off the paddle even made it shrink a little bit, but definitely hear some air coming out. So now I'll let it rise for another 30 minutes. And the science behind the punching down of the dough is that you're essentially turning the bread inside out. So you're when it's nice and round and risen, or that you need to punch it down, all the cold air is on the outside and the warm air is on the inside. So when you punch down, it inverts. So the warm air is on the outside, the cold air is on the inside, and this redistributes the yeast action, and in our case allows for more rising of the bread. All right, wow, the dough has really risen quite a bit since I last checked on it 30 minutes ago. So now I'm gonna add one of these eggs in and then beat it, wait for it to mix. Then I add the softened butter, the egg yolk, and then the remaining egg in. All right, this is what it looks like once I have added the rest of the eggs and the butter. Now I'm just gonna cover it up with plastic wrap and leave it to rest in the fridge overnight. Well, it's now been overnight. It's been about 10 hours, and I'll show you guys, but the dough, it's hard to see, it has really kind of risen just a little bit even overnight. There's a little bubble on top that wasn't there last night. And so now I'm gonna mix in the bread flour, the salt, baking soda, and baking powder into a bowl and mix it together, and then add it to the bread. And I would sift the bread flour and the salt and baking powder and baking soda, but I just looked for my sifter and I cannot find it. The chemical leaveners that is used in this recipe, such as the baking soda and the baking powder, and it turns out using the right amount of those ingredients in combining will help the dough rise. And in this recipe, it has a lot of sugar, so normally without that baking powder, it would be very heavy and very dense. Since we have the chemical leaveners, the dough can rise even with such a high amount of sugar. Although it's important not to use too much baking powder, because if you do, then it will create too many bubbles and then fall. All right, this is the dough mixture after adding in all the bread, flour, and salt, and baking powder, and baking soda. It does feel very soft. It does still feel pretty cold because it was in the fridge overnight. So now what I'm gonna do is split in half and split each half in half, and then split each fourth into 5 little round balls. So I'll show you guys that. Okay, they're now split into fourths, and they all measure in between 375 on the low end for these two, and then 376, 377 for these two. Also, I know that kitchen scales or commercial scales aren't super accurate sometimes, so I'll just take this with a grain of salt, because I don't know how accurate this scale is, but it kind of helped me in kind of to help me see if they were more or less equal. All right, they are all, each fourth is into its own little 5 individual little balls, and they all measure 75 grams, or really close to it. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is well, first I'm gonna take this cooking oil, or cooking spray, there we go, cooking spray, and I'm gonna take 6 of these individual little dough balls and place them into the loaf pan to see how they rise. Then I'm gonna take these 4, place them into this muffin tin to see how that affects the rise of them. And then with 5 others, I'm gonna not put any butter on them to see how that affects the flavor and texture. And for these 5, the ones without the butter will also be in this tin. For all of the rest of these balls, I'm just gonna shape them into a circle and not pinch them at the bottom. But with these 5, I am gonna pinch them at the bottom and then see how that goes. I thought I would just show you guys my technique for the circling them into balls. I'm kind of rubbing them, like, I guess, forming the ball in between my hands. And then I'll show you guys how I pinch the walls or the bottom of the 5. All right, so for the pinching of, I'm just keep rolling them into dough. And then I'm gonna just, this is the technique I'm using. I'm just pinching and then placing them down. All right, so we have all of the loaves in their respective tins. Now this are the 6 that are in the pan. I think that they will clump together more and not rise as much because they're together, and they have more room to expand, whereas these ones have more room to go. They don't have room to expand as much, and I predict they will go upwards. And now I haven't put the butter glaze on, but these 5 will not have the butter glaze, and these are the ones that I pinched. I'm going to use a knife to shape, like cross an X into each roll. Very hard to see, but I just kind of took a knife and sliced / crossed each dough, and I've done it with some of these ones over here. Then I'll do it with these ones. The signs behind the slashing that we did with the making a cross with the knife was slashing, and this helped allow for the dough to rise more, and also so that no steam could get trapped in the rolls during the cooking process. All right, so I have now put the butter glaze on all of the, you can kind of see the butter glaze right there and right there, but not on these 5. But now I will wait an hour and a half for them to rise. So I'll set a timer real quick, and then I'll also see you soon to preheat the oven, but I don't have a baking stone. So I'm gonna explain that. All right, these are the rolls now. They have expanded / risen quite a bit. Here's a better angle to show you. So I'm gonna start that, since I don't have a baking stone, I'm gonna heat my oven to 25 degrees lower than the baking temperature, 450, and I'm still gonna place a sheet of boiling water at the bottom of my oven. And I believe the recipe says 30 to 40 minutes in the oven, but we will know when the rolls are done when they reach above 200 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so it hasn't been the full 90 minutes. There's still about 23 minutes left, but I'm about to put the boiling water into the oven that's preheated at 425 into this pan, because these rolls have doubled according to the recipe. So, and these are the rolls that were in the tin. So far they have really stuck together and expanded outwardly more than upwardly. And the rolls in the tins, or the rolls in the muffin tins have really expanded, and so far I don't really see a difference in those with butter and those without butter. And the purpose of the boiling water at the bottom of the oven is to create steam that will go throughout the oven, and then from there that will allow for the dough to rise more or to expand more in the oven and delay the crusting of the rolls. All right, now I'm gonna set a timer for 5 minutes, wait for that steam to settle, and while that's doing, I'm gonna brush the rolls with butter again. Here are the rolls that are nice and brushed with butter for the second time, except for these 5. 5 minutes has passed for the steam to build up, and now I'm gonna really quickly place the rolls into the oven to not let any steam, to try not to let as much steam escape. And then I will turn the oven back up, or I will turn the oven up to 450. The purpose behind preheating the oven to 25 degrees below 450 is to allow for a lower base temperature so that the bread doesn't get too hot at the bottom right away and allows for more even cooking and a crust. Well, that was only 15 minutes before I checked them at 15 minutes, and it looks like they are done. I measured the bread temperature inside, and they're all above 205. So now I'm gonna let these cool down, and then I'll be able to taste them to see if there was a difference. And now that they have cooled, these are the differences. So this is the one that was in the muffin tin with butter. This is the one that was in the loaf. So quite the difference in between those two. And this is the one that was pinched at the bottom. I don't know if there was much difference. Maybe we'll taste a difference. And then this is the one that had no butter. So we'll see. The one with the, just in the muffin tin with the butter, very light, very fluffy. Quite buttery. It does have this more of a crust than the one in the loaf pan was. It's also much more formed. They taste very similar, obviously, because I didn't change any flavor in them, but there is less of a crustiness to it. I guess the crust to bread ratio is different. This is the one that I pinched with butter. Also tastes very similar to the other 3 with butter. It has a little bit of saltiness to it because the butter had salt. I don't know, I guess for me, the pulling down didn't have much of a difference. Maybe it was the technique I used. The one without butter really does not, obviously there's no butter taste, but it's even crispier to me than the other ones, which is interesting. The crust is very hard, a little drier. As you can see, these ones with without butter they're all pretty brown, but the ones without butter got a lot darker, in my opinion. And my dog is right here to catch any crumbs that might fall. To conclude, my hypothesis about the rolls in the pan versus rolls in the muffin was right. The rolls did expand quite a bit more upwards in the muffin tin than in the pan, which led to a more of a crust in the muffins and less of a crust in the pans. And then for the ones without butter, I was surprised that, I was expecting no butter flavor, but I was surprised that butter helped with the crust formation, or with less of a crust formation and more of a soft texture. And with the pinching down technique, I think that my technique might have been at fault. Maybe I should have tucked the corners a little bit more to create more of that effect. And overall, I think my experiment was very successful. And now, just to kind of elaborate on what other possible experiments you could do with this type of bread, slash just things I thought of while I was making it that I thought would be really interesting. With the time left to, experimenting with the time left to rise, or just sit there. I think the dough, if it doesn't have enough time to rise, it would be very dense, and if it has too much time to rise, then I think it could get too bubbly, and then eventually collapse into itself. And then I noticed that the author of the recipe book, Courier, she says she uses sea salt, but I just used regular salt, so I wonder, and she said that the sea salt provides more minerals for the bread, and I wonder how the sea salt minerals would affect the rising and the flavor texture of the bread. And when I used the shortening, it made me wonder what happened if I would use butter instead, or oil instead, in place of shortening in a different experiment. And I think with that, it would not be the same, because it's shortening, I think, really holds things together with its unsaturated fatty acids, with its different fatty acids. And so I feel like the oil wouldn't hold it as well together, and butter might not do super well, or might hold it too together and not let it be as airy and springy. But that is just a possible experiment. And then I know with the other loaf, the incredible basic loaf, the other option that we could have done, they used emergency 500 milligram of vitamin C tablets, and I wondered what the difference would be between the powdered packets versus the tablets, and then versus the zest of an orange. And personally, I think that the zest of an orange would add more flavor than the effect of the vitamin C, because there isn't that high concentrated in orange peel as in tablets and the powdered vitamin C. And that, I believe, is all I have for my little experiment. Thank you for watching.